In a small, quiet town nestled between rolling hills and lush green fields, life moved at its own unhurried pace. The townsfolk were simple people, farmers, shopkeepers, teachers, and artisans who went about their days with little fuss. Gossip was the lifeblood of the community, spreading faster than the wind that swept through the valley. Everyone knew everyone else's business, and strangers rarely passed through unnoticed. So when Maria walked into the local cafe one crisp autumn morning, heads turned almost immediately. Maria wasn't exactly a stranger to the town. She lived on the outskirts in a modest cottage surrounded by wildflowers and fruit trees. People often saw her tending to her garden or walking along the dirt paths with a book tucked under her arm. But despite living nearby, Maria kept mostly to herself. She didn't attend church socials, join knitting circles, or linger at the market to chat. Her solitary nature made her an enigma, and over time, the townsfolk began to form opinions about her. Some thought she was shy, others believed she was stuck up. A few even whispered that she might be a little odd, though no one could say why. On this particular day, however, curiosity outweighed judgment. The cafe buzzed with activity as usual, filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the clatter of dishes. At a corner table near the window, a group of men gathered around a chessboard. They were loud and boisterous, their laughter cutting through the hum of conversation. Chess was more than just a game for these men. It was a source of pride, a way to prove intelligence and skill, and among them Alexei reigned supreme. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with an air of authority. His victories on the board had earned him respect, and plenty of boasting rights in the town. As Maria entered the cafe, she paused for a moment, taking in the warmth of the room. Her plain dress and worn shoes contrasted sharply with the polished boots and tailored jackets of the men at the chess table. Still, she carried herself with quiet dignity, her gaze steady and calm. She approached the counter to order tea, but couldn't help noticing the animated discussion happening at the chess table. Intrigued, she hesitated before finally stepping closer. "Excuse me?" Maria said softly, her voice barely audible above the din. The men stopped mid-conversation and turned to look at her. For a brief moment, there was silence as they studied this unassuming woman who had dared to interrupt their game. "Yes?" Alexei asked, raising an eyebrow. There was a hint of amusement in his tone, as if he already found her presence amusing. "I was wondering," Maria began, her words measured and polite. "Could I perhaps join your game? I enjoy chess, and it looks like you're having fun." The men exchanged glances, and then laughter erupted, loud and mocking. One of them slapped the table, nearly knocking over a pawn. Another wiped tears from his eyes, unable to contain his mirth. Even the waitress behind the counter smirked, shaking her head slightly. "You?" One of the men choked out between laughs. "Play chess? Do you even know the rules?" Maria didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled faintly, her expression unreadable. "I do," she replied simply. "And I'd be happy to learn if I don't." Her calm response only fueled their amusement. They leaned back in their chairs, smirking and exchanging jibes. Alexei, sensing an opportunity to entertain himself further, gestured toward the empty chair across from him. All right, he said, waving a hand dismissively. "Have a seat. Let's see what you've got. But don't cry when we crush you." Maria nodded graciously and took her place at the table. The men continued to chuckle, clearly convinced that this would be an easy win. After all, how could someone like her, a quiet, unremarkable woman, possibly pose a challenge to their champion? As the pieces were set up, the atmosphere in the cafe shifted ever so slightly. The initial mockery gave way to mild curiosity, though no one expected anything remarkable to happen. Maria reached out and moved her pawn forward 2 spaces, a standard opening move. The men groaned theatrically, pretending to be bored already. "Oh, come on," one of them teased. "Is that the best you can do?" Maria merely smiled again, folding her hands neatly in her lap as she waited for Alexei's response. He leaned forward, his confidence unwavering, and countered with a move designed to assert dominance early in the game. The battle lines were drawn, though none of the men realized it yet. What they failed to notice was the subtle change in Maria's demeanor. While her outward appearance remained serene, her eyes sparkled with focus. Each glance at the board revealed a mind calculating possibilities, assessing risks and anticipating outcomes. To the casual observer, she appeared relaxed, almost indifferent. But beneath the surface, a storm of strategy was brewing. Unbeknownst to the men, they were about to discover that appearances can be deceiving. This quiet, unassuming woman harbored skills far beyond their wildest imaginations. And as the game unfolded piece by piece, they would come to regret ever doubting her. The chessboard sat between Maria and Alexei like a battlefield, waiting for its first clash. The cafe buzzed with chatter, but the men gathered around the table had grown quieter, their earlier mockery giving way to mild curiosity. They leaned in closer, craning their necks to get a better view of the board. Some sipped their coffee absent-mindedly, while others exchanged skeptical glances. None of them expected anything extraordinary to happen. After all, how could someone like Maria pose a real challenge to Alexei, the undisputed champion of their little town? Alexei, for his part, was utterly confident. He had spent years honing his skills, studying strategies, and dominating opponents. To him, this was just another game, a chance to show off and maybe have a good laugh at Maria's expense. As he surveyed the board, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of pity for her. She seemed so out of place here, sitting across from him in her simple dress, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Still, he decided to play along, if only to entertain himself and the growing crowd. "Your move," Alexei said, leaning back in his chair with an exaggerated flourish. His tone carried a mix of arrogance and condescension, as though he were already certain of the outcome. Around him, the men chuckled softly, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Maria didn't respond immediately. Instead, she studied the board with intense focus, her eyes scanning each piece as if memorizing their positions. Her expression remained calm, almost serene, but there was a sharpness to her gaze that went unnoticed by most. After a moment, she reached out and moved her knight forward, positioning it strategically near the center of the board. The reaction was immediate and predictable. One of the men snorted loudly, earning a ripple of laughter from the others. "What kind of move is that?" another teased, shaking his head in mock disbelief. "She's already losing." Alexei smirked, clearly pleased with himself. He countered quickly, advancing one of his pawns to block Maria's knight. It was a solid move, designed to assert control over the center of the board and limit her options. As he settled back into his seat, he glanced up at Maria, expecting to see a hint of frustration or uncertainty, but her face betrayed nothing. If anything, she looked even more composed than before. The game continued, with each player taking turns. Alexei played aggressively, pushing his pieces forward with bold, decisive moves. He aimed to overwhelm Maria, early on, forcing her into a defensive position where she would struggle to keep up. The men watching cheered him on, their confidence in his victory unwavering. Every time Maria made a move, they whispered among themselves, critiquing her choices and predicting her downfall. But something strange began to happen. Despite the pressure, Maria held her ground. Her moves were deliberate and precise, each one serving a purpose that wasn't immediately obvious to the casual observer. At first glance, her strategy appeared disjointed, almost clumsy. She retreated when attacked, sacrificed minor pieces without hesitation, and avoided direct confrontations. To the men watching, it seemed as though she was simply trying to delay the inevitable loss. Yet as the game progressed, subtle patterns began to emerge. Maria's pieces, though fewer in number, started to form a cohesive network. Her rooks supported her bishops, her knights guarded key squares, and her queen hovered patiently in the background, ready to strike. Slowly but surely, she began to weave a web of tactics that left Alexei increasingly uneasy. By the 10th move, the mood at the table had shifted dramatically. What had started as light-hearted amusement turned into tense silence. The men stopped laughing and leaned in closer, their earlier smugness replaced by confusion. Alexei, who had initially played with effortless confidence, now found himself hesitating. Each time he reached for a piece, he paused, his brow furrowing as he tried to anticipate Maria's next move. "She's not bad," one of the men muttered under his breath, his voice tinged with surprise. Another nodded slowly, his arms crossed as he watched the board intently. Even Alexei, who prided himself on remaining unflappable, couldn't hide the growing unease in his expression. Maria, meanwhile, remained unfazed. Her movements were smooth and unhurried, her demeanor unchanged. When Alexei captured one of her pawns, she simply nodded and adjusted her strategy accordingly. There was no trace of panic or frustration, only quiet determination. It was as if she had anticipated every twist and turn of the game, staying several steps ahead of her opponent. As the match entered its middle phase, the tension in the cafe became palpable. The clinking of cups and murmured conversations faded into the background, replaced by the rhythmic ticking of the clock and the soft scrape of wooden pieces against the board. The men who had once dismissed Maria as an amateur now watched her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. How could someone so unassuming play with such precision and foresight? Alexei, sensing the tide turning against him, doubled down on his aggression. He launched a series of attacks aiming to break through Maria's defenses and regain control of the board. But every time he thought he had cornered her, she slipped away, countering with moves that were both unexpected and devastating. His frustration mounted with each passing minute, his earlier bravado crumbling under the weight of her relentless logic. At one point, Alexei paused mid-move, his hand hovering above the board. He stared at the pieces, his mind racing as he tried to decipher Maria's plan. For the first time in years, he felt completely outmatched, not just by skill, but by sheer intellect. And yet, despite the mounting pressure, Maria showed no signs of wavering. She sat upright, her posture relaxed, her eyes steady. To anyone watching, she seemed almost detached, as if the outcome of the game mattered little to her. And perhaps it didn't. Because for Maria, this wasn't about proving herself to the men who had mocked her. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about something deeper, a love for the game itself, a respect for its intricacies, and an understanding of the human mind. With every move, she revealed not just her mastery of chess, but also her patience, humility, and grace. The cafe fell silent as the game neared its climax. The men held their breath, their earlier skepticism replaced by genuine admiration. They realized, perhaps too late, that they had underestimated her, not just as a player, but as a person. And as the final stages of the match unfolded, it became clear that Maria was no ordinary opponent. She was a force to be reckoned with, a quiet storm capable of toppling even the mightiest of champions. The chessboard now resembled a battlefield where every move carried weight, each piece a soldier fighting for survival. The tension in the cafe had reached its peak, and the once boisterous crowd was now eerily silent. Every eye was glued to the board, watching as Maria and Alexei navigated the intricate dance of strategy and counter-strategy. What had started as a casual game filled with mockery had transformed into something far more intense, a clash of minds that left no room for error. Alexei's confidence, which had been unshakable at the beginning, was now visibly crumbling. His earlier aggressive tactics, designed to overpower Maria quickly, had backfired spectacularly. Instead of breaking her defenses, they had only strengthened them. Each time he thought he had cornered her, she slipped away, countering with moves that were both calculated and devastating. His frustration grew with every passing moment, his brow furrowed deeper, his jaw clenched tighter. He could feel the eyes of his friends burning into him, their earlier amusement replaced by a mix of disbelief and unease. Maria, on the other hand, remained as calm as ever. Her movements were deliberate but unhurried, her expression serene. She didn't seem fazed by the mounting pressure or the growing tension around her. If anything, she appeared more focused than before, her sharp gaze scanning the board with precision. To the men watching, it was almost surreal. How could someone so unassuming play with such mastery? It was as if she existed in a world of her own, completely detached from the chaos unfolding around her. By the 15th move, the tide of the game had shifted dramatically. Maria's pieces, though fewer in number, worked together seamlessly, forming a network of defense and attack that left Alexei struggling to keep up. Her rooks controlled the open files, her knights darted across the board with deadly accuracy, and her queen loomed ominously, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Every piece had a purpose, every move a reason. There was no wasted effort, no unnecessary risk. It was chess played not just with skill, but with artistry. The turning point came when Alexei made a critical mistake. In his desperation to regain control, he advanced his king's pawn too far, leaving a vital square exposed. Maria saw the opening immediately. Without hesitation, she moved her bishop into position, pinning one of Alexei's key defenders against his king. The move was subtle yet devastating, cutting off several of his options and forcing him onto the defensive. The men gasped audibly, their collective breath catching in their throats. "What just happened?" one of them whispered, his voice barely audible over the silence. Another shook his head slowly, his mouth agape. Even Alexei seemed stunned, staring at the board as if trying to will the pieces back into a favorable position. But it was too late. Maria had seized the initiative, and there was no turning back. From that moment on, the game became a masterclass in precision and patience. Maria didn't rush to finish it. Instead, she tightened her grip methodically, squeezing out Alexei's remaining options one by one. She sacrificed a knight to capture a rook, then used her pawns to create an impenetrable wall around her king. Every move she made was a lesson in foresight, each decision rooted in careful calculation. The men who had initially dismissed her as an amateur now watched in awe, their skepticism replaced by admiration. Alexei, meanwhile, was unraveling. His earlier arrogance had given way to panic, his confident smirk replaced by a look of sheer bewilderment. He leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table as if trying to steady himself. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his hands trembled slightly as he reached for a piece. For the first time in years, he felt completely outmatched, not just by skill but by intellect. Maria wasn't just playing chess, she was reading him, anticipating his every move, staying several steps ahead. As the endgame approached, the atmosphere in the cafe grew heavier. The ticking of the clock seemed louder, the scraping of pieces sharper. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see how it would all unfold. Maria's final push came when she maneuvered her queen into a commanding position, supported by her remaining bishop and rook. With a single decisive move, she delivered checkmate, trapping Alexei's king with no escape. For a moment, there was complete silence. No one spoke. No one moved. The men stared at the board in stunned disbelief, their minds struggling to process what had just happened. Alexei sat frozen, his face pale, his lips parted as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Then slowly, he leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. He looked at Maria, his expression a mixture of awe and shame. I don't understand," he finally managed to say, his voice low and hoarse. "How did you do that?" Maria smiled gently, her eyes softening. "It's not about winning or losing," she replied, her tone calm and measured. "It's about understanding the game and yourself." Her words hung in the air, resonating deeply with everyone present. The men exchanged glances, their earlier mockery replaced by respect. They realized, perhaps for the first time, that they had underestimated her, not just as a player but as a person. Maria wasn't just a quiet woman who lived on the outskirts of town. She was someone with depth, wisdom, and a profound understanding of the world around her. As the reality of the situation sank in, the cafe erupted into murmurs. Some of the men clapped quietly while others simply nodded in admiration. One of them stepped forward, clearing his throat nervously. We owe you an apology," he said, his voice tinged with embarrassment. "We judged you without knowing you, And that wasn't fair. Maria nodded graciously, accepting their apology with a small smile. "Thank you," she said softly. "But let's not dwell on it. We all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them." Her humility struck a chord with everyone present. Here was a woman who had every right to gloat, to revel in her victory and remind them of their earlier rudeness. But instead she chose forgiveness and grace, offering them a lesson far greater than any chess match could provide. As the crowd dispersed, the men lingered for a while longer, discussing the game and marveling at Maria's skill. They asked her questions about her strategies, her favorite openings, and how she had learned to play so well. To their surprise, she answered patiently, sharing insights and tips without hesitation. It was clear that she loved the game not for the glory it brought, but for the joy of solving its puzzles and connecting with others through it. By the time Maria left the cafe, the entire dynamic of the town had shifted. The men who had once mocked her now regarded her with newfound respect. Word of her victory spread quickly, and soon people began visiting her cottage, not to challenge her, but to learn from her. She welcomed them warmly, teaching not just the intricacies of chess, but also lessons about patience, strategy, and seeing beyond appearances. In the days that followed, Maria's quiet strength inspired those around her to reflect on their own biases and assumptions. She proved that true greatness lies not in dominating others, but in lifting them up, even after they've underestimated you. And though the game itself was over, its impact would be felt for years to come, leaving an indelible mark on the hearts and minds of everyone who witnessed it. The aftermath of the chess match rippled through the small town like a stone dropped into still water. News of Maria's astonishing victory over Alexei spread quickly, carried by whispers in the cafe, conversations at the market, and even casual mentions during church services. What had started as a simple game between strangers had become something much bigger, a story that captured the imagination of everyone who heard it. But what truly set tongues wagging wasn't just the fact that Maria had won. It was how she had done it, with calmness, precision, and an almost otherworldly understanding of the game. Curiosity about Maria grew exponentially in the days following her triumph. People began showing up at her cottage unannounced, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman who had humbled their local champion. At first, Maria was surprised by the sudden attention. She had lived a quiet life for so long, content with her books and her garden, that the idea of being thrust into the spotlight felt foreign and slightly uncomfortable. Yet, true to her nature, she greeted each visitor with warmth and kindness, inviting them inside for tea or offering them a seat on her porch. It wasn't long before the visitors came not just out of curiosity, but also out of admiration. Many wanted to learn from her, eager to understand how she had achieved such mastery over the game. Some brought their own chessboards, hoping to play against her, while others simply asked questions about strategy and technique. Maria welcomed all of them without hesitation, happy to share her knowledge. Over time, her home became a kind of unofficial gathering place where people young and old gathered to discuss chess, ask for advice, and listen to her stories. One afternoon, as Maria sat on her porch sipping tea with a group of eager learners, someone finally asked the question that had been on everyone's mind. How did you get so good at chess? Where did you learn to play like that? Maria hesitated for a moment, setting down her teacup before answering. Her expression softened as memories flooded back, carrying her to another time and place. When I was younger, she began, her voice gentle yet thoughtful. I used to compete in tournaments, not here of course, somewhere far away. I traveled a lot back then, meeting players from different countries, learning new strategies and testing my skills against some of the best. Her words stunned the group. None of them had imagined that this quiet, unassuming woman had once been part of the competitive chess world. They listened intently as she continued, painting a picture of her past with vivid detail. I adopted a pseudonym when I played, she explained. I didn't want fame or recognition. I just loved the game. Chess has always been more than just a competition for me. It's a way to think deeply, to solve problems, and to connect with people. But after a while, I realized that the pressures of the tournament circuit weren't for me. I missed the simplicity of everyday life, the quiet moments, the freedom, to focus on things that truly mattered. She paused, glancing at the faces around her. Some looked awestruck, others thoughtful. So I stepped away, she concluded. And I came here, to this little town, where I could live peacefully and pursue my passions without distractions. The revelation left the group speechless. For many of them, Maria's story was a revelation, not just because of her hidden talent, but because of the values she embodied. In a world that often celebrated noise and ambition, Maria chose humility and introspection. She had walked away from accolades and trophies, preferring instead to live a life rooted in authenticity and purpose. As word of her background spread, the townsfolk's perception of Maria shifted dramatically. No longer was she seen as a mysterious recluse or an oddity. Instead, she became a symbol of wisdom, grace, and resilience. The men who had mocked her in the cafe returned to apologize, their faces flushed with embarrassment. To their surprise, Maria accepted their apologies graciously, explaining that everyone makes mistakes, and that growth lies in learning from them. "You taught us something important that day," Alexei admitted one evening, sitting across from her at the same cafe where their fateful game had taken place. "Not just about chess, but about ourselves. We judged you based on appearances, and we were wrong. You showed us that strength isn't always loud or obvious. It can be quiet. And understated, too." Maria smiled, her eyes twinkling with kindness. "Chess is like life," she said softly. "It's not about overpowering your opponent or proving yourself better than someone else. It's about seeing the bigger picture, anticipating challenges, and finding ways to adapt. Sometimes the most powerful moves are the ones no one expects." Her philosophy resonated deeply with those around her, inspiring them to reflect on their own lives. Slowly but surely, Maria's influence began to shape the community in subtle yet profound ways. The men who had once dismissed her now sought her counsel, valuing her insights not just in chess but in personal matters as well. Parents encouraged their children to visit her, hoping they would absorb some of her wisdom and patience. Even the local school invited her to give talks, sharing her love for chess and her unique perspective on life. But perhaps the most remarkable change occurred within Alexei himself. Once brash and overconfident, he emerged from the experience humbled and transformed. He spent hours practicing with Maria, determined to improve his skills and understand the depth of the game she cherished so much. Under her guidance, he learned to approach chess and life with greater humility and thoughtfulness. Their rivalry evolved into a friendship built on mutual respect, with Alexei often joking that losing to Maria had been the best thing that ever happened to him. Over time, Maria's presence became woven into the fabric of the town. She wasn't just a neighbor or a mentor. She was a guiding light, someone who reminded others of the importance of looking beyond surface-level judgments. Her cottage remained a hub of activity, buzzing with laughter, conversation, and the occasional clatter of chess pieces. And though she never sought recognition or praise, her impact was undeniable. In the evenings, when the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, Maria would often sit on her porch, watching the stars emerge one by one. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had touched lives in ways she hadn't anticipated. For Maria, it wasn't about winning games or earning accolades. It was about making connections, fostering understanding, and leaving the world a little brighter than she had found it. And so, the story of the quiet woman who had defeated a room full of skeptics, with nothing more than a chessboard, and her intellect continued to inspire. It served as a reminder that greatness isn't measured by titles or trophies, but by the ability to uplift others, even those who might have doubted you at first. As the weeks turned into months, Maria's influence on the town grew in ways no one could have predicted. What had begun as a single chess match had blossomed into a movement of sorts, a quiet revolution that brought people together and changed the way they saw themselves and each other. The men who had once mocked her were now among her most devoted students, spending hours hunched over chessboards in her cozy cottage or under the shade of the trees in her garden. But it wasn't just about the game anymore. Through Maria's teachings, they were learning lessons that extended far beyond the 64 squares of the chessboard. Maria had a gift for storytelling, and she often used anecdotes from her past to illustrate deeper truths. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across her porch, she gathered a group of eager listeners around her. Among them were Alexei, his friends, and even some children who had started tagging along to hear her tales. She poured cups of warm tea for everyone before settling into her chair, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Let me tell you about a tournament I played in many years ago," she began, her voice soft but clear. It was held in a grand hall filled with hundreds of players, each one determined to win. The stakes were high and the atmosphere was electric, but something strange happened during the final round. She paused, letting the suspense build. The group leaned forward, hanging on her every word. "I was paired against a man known for his aggressive style. He attacked relentlessly, pushing his pieces forward with brute force. At first glance, it seemed like he would overwhelm me easily, but instead of panicking, I focused on building my defenses, waiting for the right moment to strike. And then, when he least expected it, I made my move, not a flashy one, but a quiet, calculated maneuver that left him trapped." The children gasped, their imaginations painting vivid pictures of the dramatic showdown. Even the adults listened intently, captivated by the simplicity and elegance of her strategy. "The lesson I learned that day," Maria continued, "is that strength doesn't always come from loud displays or bold actions. Sometimes the most powerful moves are the ones that go unnoticed until it's too late. In chess and in life, it's important to stay patient, observe carefully, and trust your instincts." Her words resonated deeply with those present. For Alexei, who had once prided himself on his aggressive playing style, this was a revelation. He realized that his earlier failures hadn't been due to a lack of skill, but rather a lack of perspective. Under Maria's guidance, he began to adopt a more balanced approach, blending aggression with patience and foresight. His improvement was remarkable, earning him newfound respect not only from his peers but also from himself. The transformation wasn't limited to Alexei alone. The entire town seemed to undergo a subtle shift, thanks to Maria's quiet leadership. People who had previously bickered over trivial matters now found common ground over shared interests. Neighbors who rarely spoke to each other started meeting regularly at Maria's cottage, bonding over games of chess and lively discussions. Even the local cafe, once a hub of gossip and rivalry, became a place of camaraderie and mutual support. Maria's generosity knew no bounds. She didn't charge for her lessons or demand recognition for her contributions. Instead, she gave freely of her time and knowledge, encouraging others to do the same. When asked why she chose to help so many people without expecting anything, in return she simply smiled and said, "Kindness is its own reward. When we lift others up, we rise together." Her philosophy inspired others to pay it forward. One woman, inspired by Maria's example, began offering free cooking classes to teach traditional recipes. A retired carpenter started repairing broken furniture for neighbors in need. Even the children who had initially come to learn chess began organizing small acts of kindness, helping elderly residents carry groceries or planting flowers in neglected corners of the town square. But perhaps the most touching moment came when the townsfolk decided to honor Maria in their own special way. On a crisp autumn morning, a group of volunteers gathered in the park to unveil a statue dedicated to her. Carved from smooth stone, the sculpture depicted Maria seated at a chessboard, her expression calm and thoughtful. Her hands rested gently on the table, as if poised to make her next move. Around the base of the statue, a plaque bore an inscription, "To Maria, a quiet force who taught us all how to see beyond appearances." When Maria arrived at the park later that day, she was overwhelmed by emotion. Dozens of people had gathered to celebrate her, their faces beaming with gratitude and admiration. Some held handmade signs thanking her for her wisdom and kindness, while others presented her with gifts, books, flowers, and even a hand-knitted scarf. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked around at the crowd, her heart swelling with love and appreciation. "I never imagined," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I never imagined that my little corner of the world could become such a beautiful community. You've all shown me what it means to truly connect with each other, with our passions and with ourselves. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey." Her heartfelt words brought tears to the eyes of many in the crowd. It was clear that Maria wasn't just a teacher or a mentor. She was a beacon of hope and inspiration, someone who had touched lives in ways words could barely capture. In the years that followed, the tradition of honoring Maria continued. Every autumn, the town hosted a chess tournament in her name, drawing players from neighboring villages and cities. The event was more than just a competition. It was a celebration of the values Maria had instilled in the community: patience, humility, and the belief that greatness lies not in dominating others but in uplifting them. Even after Maria passed away, her legacy lived on. The statue in the park remained a cherished landmark, a reminder of the quiet woman who had transformed a town with nothing more than a chessboard and her unwavering kindness. Parents told their children stories about her, passing down her lessons through generations. Teachers incorporated her philosophies into their classrooms, encouraging students to think critically and act compassionately. And so, Maria's story became a timeless tale, a testament to the power of humility, grace, and the ability to see beauty in unexpected places. She had proven that true greatness isn't measured by trophies or titles, but by the impact we have on the lives of others. Through her quiet strength and boundless generosity, she had left an indelible mark on the hearts and minds of everyone she touched. Years passed, and though Maria was no longer physically present in the town, her spirit lingered like a gentle breeze that swept through every corner of the community. Her legacy became woven into the fabric of daily life, a quiet reminder of the power of kindness, humility, and seeing beyond surface appearances. The statue in the park remained a cherished landmark, its stone surface weathered by time, but still radiating warmth and wisdom. Children played around it, their laughter echoing as they learned to play chess on makeshift boards nearby. Older residents often sat on benches close by, sharing stories about Maria with younger generations, ensuring her memory would never fade. Each autumn, the town came alive with energy for the annual chess tournament held in her honor. What had started as a small gathering of locals had grown into a regional event, drawing players from far and wide. The competition wasn't just about winning, it was about celebrating the values Maria had instilled in the community. Participants were encouraged not only to focus on their games, but also to engage with one another respectfully, offering encouragement rather than criticism. It was common to see seasoned players mentoring newcomers, explaining strategies or simply cheering them on after a tough match. The atmosphere buzzed with camaraderie, laughter, and shared joy, a testament to how deeply Maria's influence had taken root. One year during the tournament, an unexpected visitor arrived in town, a young woman named Elena, who claimed to be Maria's niece. She carried with her a small wooden box, intricately carved and polished to a soft sheen. When she approached the organizing committee, tears glistened in her eyes as she explained her purpose. "Aunt Maria left this for the town," she said, softly, holding out the box. "She told me to deliver it when I felt the time was right." Curious and moved, the townsfolk gathered at the park that evening to open the box together. Inside, they found a collection of handwritten letters, each addressed to someone in the town. Some were written to individuals: Alexei, the cafe owner, even the children who had once trailed behind Maria asking endless questions. Others were meant for groups, like the volunteers who helped organize the tournaments or the families who had welcomed her into their homes over the years. Each letter overflowed with gratitude, love, and personalized advice tailored to the recipient's life. For Alexei, Maria's words read, "You once thought strength was about domination, but you've since discovered that true power lies in balance and understanding. Keep nurturing your growth, not just as a player but as a person." To the children, she wrote, "Never stop asking questions and dreaming big. The world is full of puzzles waiting to be solved, and your curiosity will lead you to places you can't yet imagine. And to the town as a whole, her message was simple yet profound. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. Remember always that greatness isn't measured by what we achieve alone, but by how we lift others up along the way. The letters brought tears to many eyes, reigniting memories of Maria's quiet generosity and wisdom. They served as both a reminder of her enduring presence and a call to continue living according to the principles she had championed. Inspired by her final gift, the townsfolk redoubled their efforts to uphold her legacy, not just during the tournament but throughout the year. Over time, the annual event evolved into something more than a chess competition. Workshops were added, focusing on topics like critical thinking, teamwork, and conflict resolution. Local artisans set up stalls selling handmade crafts, while musicians performed folk songs under the trees. Food vendors offered traditional dishes, filling the air with mouth-watering aromas. The festival became a celebration of community, creativity, and connection, all rooted in the lessons Maria had taught. Children grew up hearing tales of Maria's brilliance and compassion, internalizing her teachings as guiding principles for their own lives. One such child was Sophia, a bright-eyed girl who had first learned to play chess at the age of 6 under Maria's patient guidance. By the time she turned 12, Sophia had become a formidable player, representing her town in regional competitions. More importantly, however, she embodied Maria's values, treating opponents with respect and using her skills to inspire others. When asked about her secret to success, Sophia always smiled and said, "It's not about winning, it's about learning and growing together." Even decades later, long after those who had known Maria personally had passed away, her story continued to resonate. Historians visiting the town marveled at how a single individual could leave such a lasting impact. Writers penned articles and books about her life, capturing her philosophy and the ripple effect it had created. Artists painted murals depicting scenes from her days teaching chess, immortalizing moments of laughter, concentration, and triumph. The statue in the park remained a pilgrimage site for visitors seeking inspiration, its inscription shining brightly despite the wear of time. In subtle ways, Maria's influence extended beyond the borders of the town. Former residents who had moved away carried her lessons with them, spreading her message of humility and perseverance wherever they went. Teachers incorporated her methods into classrooms. Parents shared her stories with their children, and strangers recounted her tale, to friends passing it along like a treasured heirloom. Her name became synonymous with grace and resilience, proof that one person's quiet actions could spark meaningful change. And so, Maria's legacy endured, not because of grand gestures or monumental achievements, but because of the countless, small acts of kindness and wisdom she had shared. She had shown the people of her town that greatness isn't about being louder, faster, or stronger than everyone else. It's about lifting others up, seeing the potential in those around you, and leaving the world a little brighter than you found it. Through her, they had learned that even the simplest among us can hold extraordinary gifts, and that the most powerful moves are often the ones made with love, patience, and grace. As the sun set on another autumn evening, casting golden light over the park where her statue stood, the townsfolk gathered once again. They placed fresh flowers at the base of the monument, their hearts full of gratitude. Though Maria was gone, her presence lingered in every smile, every handshake, and every game played on the chessboard scattered across the grass. Her story lived on, not just in memories, but in the lives she had touched and transformed. And in that way, she remained eternal, a quiet force whose influence would ripple through generations to come.